Well, hello and welcome. For those who I have not had the chance to meet before, I am Dr. Richard Nongard, and I'm a state licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I'm also the president of the ICBCH, the International Certification Board of Clinical Hypnotherapists. My educational background is important to the subject of Ericksonian hypnotherapy training. I have a fully accredited master's degree in counseling from Liberty University, and I have a fully accredited doctorate in cultural transformation from Bakke Graduate University. Both schools are accredited by an accreditor recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, as well as CHIA, the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. This is important because the subject of Ericksonian hypnotherapy really is an academic subject. And what I'm going to be doing is, in this course, is translating the academic study of Milton Erickson's work to a practical application for all of those who are participating who work as NLP practitioners, clinical hypnotherapists, or hypnotists in other areas of helping people. I learned Ericksonian hypnosis originally with Dr. Dean Montgomery as part of my master's degree practicum in 1990. I didn't realize at the time what a gift it was, but Dr. Montgomery was a member of both ASH as well as the Society for Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis, and he was a fantastic mentor who remains, more than 25 years later, a good friend of mine. In 2005, I had the opportunity to study with somebody who was very important to Milton Erickson, and this was Dr. Robert Bolle. I had the chance to study with him in Germany through the American branch of the American Counseling Association and learn Ericksonian hypnotherapy with him as well. Dr. Bolle was, of course, a trained associate of Milton Erickson's, and he is a retired psychology professor from the University of Central Florida. I point out these qualifications at the beginning of this course because I think it's important to recognize that over the last 25 years, I've been practicing Ericksonian hypnotherapy. Sometimes people associate me with what's called contextual hypnotherapy, or approaches to mindfulness-based stress reduction and clinical hypnosis. And while certainly that is true, the foundation for the way I interact with my clients, the foundation for my philosophy of client care, the way that I often speak to my clients really comes, I think, from my Ericksonian training. Now, there are no required textbooks for this course, but I want to highlight here at the beginning of this course that there are several textbooks that this course will draw material from. And I recommend that you purchase the following books, and the material, of course, during these lectures will primarily be drawn from these various resources. The first book is Transwork, an introduction to the practice of clinical hypnosis by Michael Yapko. The second, Therapeutic Trances, the Cooperation Principle in Ericksonian Hypnotherapy by Stephen Gilligan, which, by the way, is one of my all-time favorite books. By the way, because these are textbooks, they are quite expensive, and I certainly don't expect you to buy each one of these books, for this course. But having these in your library will certainly be an addition to you as you continue to study Ericksonian hypnotherapy. The third book is Ericksonian Approaches, a Comprehensive Manual by Bettino and South. My Voice Will Go With You by Sidney Rosen. Uncommon Therapy, the Psychiatric Techniques of Milton Erickson by Jay Haley. Patterns of Hypnotic Techniques of Milton Erickson by Richard Bandler. Time Distortion in Hypnosis by Milton Erickson. Experiencing Hypnosis, Therapeutic Approaches to Altered States by Milton Erickson and Ernest Rossi. And, of course, the collected works of Milton Erickson, Volume 1 through 4 by Milton Erickson and others as well. Again, these are excellent textbooks. They're part of my library. They have been for many years, marked up, written on, dog-eared, labeled with a yellow sticky and a note here and there, and I'm going to be sharing things from these textbooks that are going to be very practical and useful to you in the work that you do. My goal is to create 16 sessions each with a very practical focus, helping you to learn how to essentially speak Ericksonian before this class is over. The course organization, let me take just a couple of minutes to cover that. This is an audio course which will consist of 16 lessons. The reason why I chose to do this as an audio course is it makes it really mobile. You can, of course, listen to the 16 audio sessions on my website by simply clicking the play button and playing. But you can also right-click on those links and you can actually download these, and you could burn a CD if you wanted to. Put them in your car. You could burn them to an MP3, put them all on a flash drive, and use that in your car radio if you have a up-to-date modern car radio. You can download them to your Android device, to iTunes, and put them on your iPod if you want to. Whatever you want to do with them, that's awesome. To make this material convenient for you to be able to listen to in really any location and at any time. One thing I would like to point out is you have, of course, paid for this content. And so please reserve this content for those who have also paid the tuition for this course by not sharing it. Now, there is no time limit to complete the course, but those who do complete the course will have an examination available to them, and you'll receive a certificate of achievement in Ericksonian hypnotherapy from the International Certification Board of Clinical Hypnotherapists. And I'm recommending to everybody that you actually set aside time to listen to the audio portions of each class and to practice the exercise. Each lesson comes with 2 or 3 exercises to help reinforce the material and actually practice those before moving on to the next lesson. Now, hopefully this is going to be one of those courses that you're going to actually want to listen to over and over again. And so because I figure this will probably be part of your resource library over the next couple of years, do actually create a schedule for the first time you go through the material. So you're listening to, for example, one audio session each day for 16 days. Or you could, listen to one in the morning and, one in the afternoon, or you could listen to one every other day. But actually try to come up with a schedule. And don't worry if you don't get everything in each lesson that's important. You can always come back to it later on. That's the value of having a course in this simple format. When you set a schedule, though, one that you would like to set, it's going to increase the likelihood of you following through and actually gaining knowledge from all 16 lessons. So that certainly is my recommendation. Now let's get right into the material. And before we go any further and I begin to share with you techniques for Ericksonian hypnotherapy, let me share with you a little bit about who Milton Erickson was. He was, of course, a psychiatrist who specialized in treating medical conditions utilizing medical hypnosis, and he was also a family therapist known for his work in family therapy. He viewed the unconscious mind as being infinitely intelligent, a reservoir of solutions and creativity. I think many of Milton Erickson's ideas about the power of the mind actually came out of his own experiences having survived polio at age 17. The Milton Erickson Foundation on their website has a biography of Dr. Erickson, and it actually says this of the young Dr. Erickson. At age 17, he contracted polio and was so severely paralyzed that doctors believed he would die. While recovering in bed, almost entirely lame and unable to speak, he became strongly aware of the significance of nonverbal communication, the body, the tone of voice, and the way that these nonverbal expressions always directly contradicted the verbal ones. He also began to have body memories of the muscular activity of his own body. By concentrating on these memories, he slowly began to regain control of parts of his body to the point where he was eventually able to talk and to use his arms again. His doctor recommended exercising his upper body only, so Milton Erickson planned a 1,000-mile canoe trip to build up the strength and to attend college. According to the website, his adventure was challenging, and although he did not have the full use of his legs at the end, he was able to walk with a cane up until old age, where Milton Erickson was eventually confined to a wheelchair for mobility. But without a doubt, his own personal experiences in using the power of his mind to recover from the tragic medical condition of polio certainly became an experiential base of knowledge for him to really begin to utilize the techniques of solid clinical hypnotherapy to help a wide variety of medical clients. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the influence of Milton Erickson. He is perhaps the most widely studied hypnotist in the world. His influence extends far beyond medical hypnosis and family therapy. In fact, we can see his influence, particularly in language structure, in the cadence of hypnotherapists, and the proximity of therapists to their client, really in almost every approach to hypnosis, NLP, and contextual psychology. In fact, it's interesting, whenever I see somebody who practices regression hypnotherapy, but they're using the language patterns or the techniques of Milton Erickson, and Milton Erickson was, of course, not a regressionist. We'll get to that later on, but it's interesting to see that even in therapeutic techniques not associated with Erickson's ideas, many of his methods of communication are still utilized. Almost everybody who is practicing hypnosis today, and I would even include stage hypnotists in this, have had an experience of being profoundly influenced by Milton Erickson's work. Before I can begin teaching you the strategies of Milton Erickson that you can use in your own practice, let me share with you some of the hallmarks or the presuppositions of Erickson's approach. Now, really, there are three, or have been defined, three primary approaches to hypnosis. The first is the authoritarian approach. This is really predicated on the hypnotist doing something to somebody. This is in stage hypnosis where the all-powerful Bengali character controls another person's will. And really what we know is that that's more theater or drama or social compliance than anything else. But really up until Milton Erickson's time, many hypnotists used primarily an authoritarian approach. They might have not been abusive about it, but they simply told the person what to do. And now I will count backwards from 1 to 3. And when I do, you will do this. 1, close your eyes. 2, relax further. 3, drift deep into trance. That is really an authoritarian approach, where the hypnotist tells somebody what they will do, expecting that response. And the authoritarian approach is something that really probably was taught as the primary approach to hypnosis up until Milton Erickson's time. What's been referred to as the standard approach differs from the authoritarian approach, and the authoritarian approach is predicated on a hypnotist doing something. The standard approach is predicated on whether or not the subject is suggestible. This is really the approach that came out of the 50s and 60s and a lot of research done on hypnosis as researchers tried to examine the efficacy of hypnosis. Things like the Stanford scale were developed, and when they were, this was really predicated on whether or not we have somebody who is responsive and highly suggestible. So the authoritarian approach is dependent on the hypnotist. The standard approach was really predicated on the subject. Ericksonian hypnosis has been called by Stephen Gilligan a cooperation approach. And this is because in an Ericksonian model of hypnosis, the hypnotist and the subject are really considered a community. Rather than being autonomous from one another, they both change each other. This is part of the transformational process of hypnotherapy. Stephen Gilligan, in his book, Therapeutic Trances, actually summarizes the foundation of the Ericksonian approach this way. Its context is clinical therapy. Milton Erickson was a physician who healed people. Now, I recognize there are a lot of people selling Ericksonian hypnotherapy or Ericksonian hypnosis courses on the internet so that you can, control women, start your own cult, or dominate the world. Milton Erickson's focus was on helping people to get better. He treated as a physician medical illnesses. As a family therapist, he treated the importance of relationships and their meaning to individuals. So the context of these recordings is going to be clinical therapy, learning Ericksonian techniques so that we can help people and help people to actually get better. The intent of Ericksonian hypnosis is to present opportunities for transformational change. I love the word transformational change. It doesn't simply indicate a change in beliefs or a change in behaviors or a change in outlook or some other temporal change. Transformational change really is about changing the core of who a person is. It's really about putting the old away and stepping into a new self-identity. And the way Stephen Gilligan summarizes the Ericksonian approach is that this is an opportunity. And so I suppose the first real learning in this class as far as technique goes is to recognize that every time we have a client in our office, we actually have an opportunity that we're helping them with. And when we recognize that opportunity is what we are helping people to achieve, it really makes the process of working with clients a joy. I notice a lot of new hypnotists sometimes post on HypnoThoughts or my forum at ICBCH Hey, I've never hypnotized anybody before. This is scary. I have my first client coming in. And I think that when we recognize that, wow, that first client is a opportunity, it really takes the pressure off. And that is true for the experienced hypnotist as well. Gilligan tells us that the focal point of an Ericksonian hypnosis process is a cooperative relationship. We are with our client. We're not doing something to them, and we're not doing something for them. This is why it's so transformational. We're doing something with them. We're functioning as their coach, somebody who is with them, and really that cooperative relationship is a tremendous focal point in Ericksonian hypnotherapy. The type of hypnotic communication, according to Gilligan, is a flexible communication that's adaptive to the client and their particular need. What's the task of the subject in Ericksonian hypnosis? It is intimacy, to explore within a safe interpersonal context with the hypnotist opportunities for transformational change and solutions. Now, I created with John Sorbonne a set of DVDs back in 2006 called Speed Trance, and as stage hypnotists, we wanted to show off our skills in rapid and instant induction. Milton Erickson, of course, was not known for rapid inductions. In fact, according to Gilligan, the typical length of his induction was 30 to 60 minutes. Some people in the modern era would say, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Why not just do a rapid induction and get on with it? The reason why is because if you're a good hypnotist, the induction is as important as any other part of the hypnosis session. The induction in Ericksonian hypnotherapy is not something we get through so that we can get to the good stuff. It is actually the good stuff. In fact, I've said often in my office that when they get to my hypnotic chair, when they close their eyes, and when I actually count backwards and engage in the ritual we call hypnosis, 9 times out of 10, I'm actually done with the work of change, and this is merely the ritual to ratify the change which has already taken place. A lot of people are curious about the idea of conversational hypnosis. Milton Erickson's 30 to 60 minute induction process was not to get somebody to a point of hypnosis. It was about, through those conversations, through that pre-talk, as some people refer to it, to present opportunities and choices for transformational change, so the work was often already done. According to Gilligan, the response to a non-hypnotic response by the client is for the therapist to adapt to the client's patterns. Now, this is really important here. I get this all the time. What if the client doesn't close their eyes? Or, what if the client opens their eyes? Or what if the client coughs? Or what if the client, isn't in a deep level of trance? Or, what if the client moves around? Or what if the client fidgets? And the question is often asked of me because there's an expectation that I will be able to teach them how to get the client to stop doing that. In Erickson's approach, the therapist actually has to adapt to the client's patterns. And so an Ericksonian hypnotist is going to understand how to utilize those things rather than be frustrated. This is a matter of going with the client rather than trying to change the client. And according to Gilligan, the major data of interest to the Ericksonian hypnotist is the client's internal experience and the subsequent behavioral changes which takes place. This is really important here. Unlike Sigmund Freud, the major data of interest here is not the past. It's the current experience. The only experience we have is that which is right now, this internal experience, the one that you're having while you listen to my voice as you listen to this first lesson, and the subsequent behavioral changes that come from engaging in any activity. This is really important, and one of the things that I think differentiates it from other approaches to hypnosis, approaches that really focus on the past. Milton Erickson certainly focused on the present. Gilligan, in his book Therapeutic Trances, summarizes some other differences between an Ericksonian approach and other approaches to hypnosis. First, in an Ericksonian approach, the uniqueness of each client is celebrated, and that's really important. No two clients are the same. No two processes work with everybody the exact same way, and everybody has unique needs. The second difference between Ericksonian hypnosis and perhaps other approaches is that hypnosis is an experiential process of communicating ideas. Really, those who learn Ericksonian hypnosis are becoming experts at communicating experiential processes with other people. This is one of the reasons why I love Ericksonian hypnosis. It's really about experience. Gilligan points out that Milton Erickson and his approach to hypnosis in creating cooperation, that each person has within them generative resources. Now, this certainly was true of Milton Erickson when he had polio. Medicine at that point wasn't able to do really much for him. In fact, he was written off as most likely not going to be able to make it, or if he did make it, not having the ability to really function. But Milton Erickson looked within himself, within the power of his own mind, to utilize those muscle memories so that he could begin his own process of physical as well as mental, and I'm certain spiritual healing as well. Trance also in Ericksonian hypnosis potentiates resources. The focused concentration or the heightened awareness in a hypnotic state potentiates resources. It draws our attention to things that we otherwise might miss because of the busyness of our experiences outside of a trance state. And trance itself is a useful state. So often I meet new hypnotists who think that it's their words that are important in the process of change. What if I get the word wrong? Or what if I say something wrong? Really, what Milton Erickson's position was that trance was what was valuable rather than the hypnotist's words. Gilligan points out that Ericksonian hypnosis also views trance as a naturalistic state, something that occurs in everyday life. I've often said the real issue for the hypnotist is not how do I hypnotize somebody, but how do I utilize the naturally occurring trance states that we're always in. I've said we have our parenting trance, our teaching trance, our relaxing and watching TV trance, our paying attention, our reading trance, our praying trance, our golfing trance. I mean, whatever it is that you do in life. The real question isn't how do I hypnotize somebody. The real question is how do I utilize the naturally occurring trance phenomena that my clients present to me in the office. Ericksonian hypnosis also differs from other approaches in that Ericksonian approaches are really oriented to life course alignment rather than to a perspective of error correction. We're not really trying to fix what's wrong. In fact, one of the presuppositions of NLP, and I know that many of you have taken NLP courses, is that there is no such thing as failure, only feedback. That's usually attributed to Bateson. But really, this is a foundation of Ericksonian approaches as well. Erickson really approached the problem as as right course alignment, the task of hypnosis, rather than error correcting in a person's life. Here are some quotes from Stephen Gilligan. Erickson focused on achieving the goals of needs of the present self, not in understanding the past. This is really important. It was Sigmund Freud's idea that we have to go back into the past in order to find some sort of initial sensitizing event so that today will be okay. It was not Milton Erickson's idea. Milton Erickson really focused on achieving goals and needs of the present self without understanding the past. Gilligan actually said this, according to Erickson, problems are a deviation from the natural biological course of personal evolution. Problems are a secondary aspect of development. Solutions, growth, that's the primary aspect of development and what we focus on. In other words, Milton Erickson's work really is a solution-oriented approach. In contextual hypnotherapy, those who've taken the ICBCH advanced class know that I spend a lot of time talking about solution-focused brief therapy. And again, these ideas that came out of Milwaukee in the 1980s that have been evidence-based and research-based really, I think, to some extent have the root in the perspectives of Milton Erickson, who didn't see problems as the focus of therapy. Instead, he looked at solutions as the primary aspect of the therapeutic process. Gilligan also saw Ericksonian hypnosis differing from other forms of hypnosis and other forms of therapy in that Erickson recognized that a person's uniqueness could be appreciated in many different ways. Gilligan actually gives us 4 different ways. The deep self, the essence of what a person is. This is really, to some extent, their spiritual self, who they are at the deepest, most core level. Then, of course, we can understand and appreciate people at the level of the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind, of course, keeps us alive. It protects us. This is the part of the mind that is at the base of the brain, the amygdala. It controls breathing. It controls heart rate. It controls blood flow. This is where the fight or flight response lies. And this is the unconscious mind. It tells us that we're hungry. It helps keep us alive, and it really helps protect us. Now, a lot of people think that the unconscious mind isn't something that can change. But the Russian psychologist Pavlov, remember Pavlov's dogs, actually demonstrated that the unconscious mind could be changed, because through operant conditioning, he rang the bell, and the dogs began to salivate, which is, of course, a process of the unconscious mind. But the conscious mind is the third element where a person's uniqueness can be appreciated. And this is really the vast reservoir of a lifetime of knowledge and experience. And those who are familiar with the work of Carl Jung will really appreciate the ideas of the conscious mind as a vast reservoir of our lifetime knowledge and experience. And I'm always amazed at the power of the of the conscious mind. And then, of course, there are the contents of consciousness, the present moment, or the experience. You know, in the world of psychology and contextual approaches, we talk about John Kabat-Zinn, and we talk about mindfulness-based stress reduction. And in the field of pop psychology, of course, we have, I think Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. Really, Milton Erickson, again, back in the 1950s, 1960s, taught us to appreciate people through the contents of their consciousness, the present moment, the current experience that they bring to us. And that present focus really is very important. And the 8th way that Ericksonian hypnosis is different from other approaches is that unconscious processes can operate generatively and autonomously. And the approaches that I'm going to share with you in this course are approaches to hypnotherapy that can help us to utilize that generative capacity and the autonomous capacity of a client acting on their own. One of the things that I don't do with clients is I don't do long-term therapy. The reason why I don't do long-term therapy, see them for 16, 24, 54, 104 sessions, unlike Sigmund Freud, is that my goal is to help my client to function without me. That's how I know I'm a good hypnotist. I know I'm a good hypnotist because my clients don't need to come back to me anymore. Because through the cooperative relationship, I teach them to be generative and I teach them to be autonomous, utilizing opportunities which they bring to my office. I'm going to turn now to one of the other things that I think is a chief difference between Ericksonian hypnotherapy and other approaches, and this is the utilization aspects of Ericksonian hypnotherapy. Erickson accepted clients no matter where they could be or should be, but where they were, and that's really important. He used their frame as a foundation for therapy. He never devised his theory of human behavior. The reason why he didn't is because he said then clients would have to be fit into that a mold or theory, and he wanted to be able to use their frame as the foundation for therapy. Like Carl Rogers, Milton Erickson thought that it was important not to impose the therapist values, beliefs, or biases in the process, but to operate from the perspective that our client has brought to our office the resources that they need for change and that they will tell us what those things are. Milton Erickson was not a Procrustean. Procrustes was a Greek thief in mythology, and he stretched out his victims onto the bed. If they were too short for the bed, he would stretch them out so they fit the bed, and if they were too tall for the bed, he would cut them down to size. And this is, by the way, a story from Greek mythology that Milton Erickson would actually utilize or tell in hypnosis, the myth of Procrustes. Now, this is really pretty important because Milton Erickson was a master storyteller. And for you to learn how to speak Ericksonian, you're going to learn to be a master storyteller. And people always say to me, well, where do you get the stories? How am I going to write stories and make up stories? I'm not a great storyteller. And what Milton Erickson did was he actually borrowed some stories from others. He didn't only talk about his own life or write his own stories, but he borrowed stories from mythology, borrowed stories from religion, he borrowed stories from other clients. And I think it's important right here at the outset to recognize that it's perfectly okay to share poems, to share stories, to share learnings from history, myths, and those sorts of things, because Erickson certainly did that. Erickson is attributed, one of the legends of Milton Erickson, he was this great storyteller, and he was. But some of the stories that he told weren't necessarily stories that he had written himself. And so I think that gives us permission in Ericksonian hypnosis to utilize stories from a variety of different sources and to still consider ourselves to be exceptional Ericksonians. Milton Erickson used the client's behavior that they brought to us. This is what is meant by utilization. For example, in the induction process, rather than taking an authoritarian approach and saying, now it is time for the induction. So go ahead and close your eyes, breathe in and breathe out, and relax the muscles of your body. You are now going into trance. That would be an example of an authoritarian approach. Milton Erickson would actually utilize whatever experience was going on. So if somebody was sitting across from him and talking, and maybe they were just tracing with one of their fingers the fabric on the pocket of their pants, or even touching the inseam of their pants, Erickson would say something like this to begin his hypnotic induction. I noticed that you're brailing the fabric of your jeans. By the way, that was one of Milton Erickson's lines. What a brilliant line. And of course, back in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have the same technology resources for those who are blind that we have now. And of course, Braille was, certainly probably at sort of the highlight of its career at that time. So when he said that to a client, I noticed that you are brailing the fabric of your, slacks. It really engaged the person who was probably doing that unconsciously into the present moment, causing what in NLP is often referred to as a pattern interrupt. And this is just one example of how Milton Erickson utilized whatever the client brought to us. In fact, one story of Milton Erickson was when he was working with a patient in an inpatient psychiatric facility. And this patient was delusional and believed that he was Jesus Christ. And he would dress in robes and he would act like Jesus. And so Milton Erickson, the psychiatrist of this person in an inpatient treatment center, instead of confronting him and saying, "You're not Jesus," he said to him, "So I understand you have an extensive experience in carpentry." And the delusional Jesus answered, "Well, yes, I do." And so Milton Erickson put him to work using carpentry skills to build things as part of his therapy. Milton Erickson used whatever the client brought to him. There was a story of Milton Erickson who treated an industrialist who had lost all his money and gotten into depression, and he described very kinesthetically his despair by saying, "Gosh, it's like this tension on my chest," and the client would actually, move his hands in and out across his chest. Milton Erickson suggested, since he brought movement to the therapy session, that he actually move his hands up and down, up and down. And then Milton Erickson gave him some sandpaper and introduced him to an occupational therapist where that person went up and down, sanding wood so that he could actually create wonderful art. And that industrialist, within a short period of time, found a tremendous amount of relief to his symptoms because of the intervention of Milton Erickson. And these stories also point something else out. And that is that while we associate Milton Erickson with hypnosis, Milton Erickson was a psychiatrist. He treated a wide variety of different individuals, some with what we are going to commonly associate with hypnosis, and others without what we commonly associate with hypnosis, but with the same principles of utilization to help those people make significant changes. I want to share with you now a few of my observations about Erickson's personal style. And these are some things that you're going to learn and that hopefully I can model for you over the next 16 sessions. I'm actually going to do a fair number of demonstrations through each of these things. And each audio session is actually going to conclude with some exercises for you to reinforce these things. The Milton Erickson Foundation owns the copyright to all of Milton Erickson's teaching videos. They are available only for purchase to licensed mental health professionals, which I am, and I have probably seen all of his published videos that I'm aware of at one point or another. Occasionally they're posted on YouTube or Vimeo or other forums, and the Milton Erickson Foundation almost always instantly files a copyright claim under the Millennial Digital Copyright Act and has those removed. But chances are pretty good you've seen at least some of Milton Erickson's clips over the past few years. And so I'm going to point out for you just some of my own observations of Milton Erickson's personal style. And Ernest Rossi, who was a contemporary of Milton Erickson's, in fact, many of the books by Milton Erickson have also been co-written by Ernest Rossi. Any book by Ernest Rossi is going to be an excellent book on clinical hypnosis, by the way. But Rossi actually called Erickson's approach belly button to belly button communication. What a great metaphor. In other words, at the deepest levels, exchanging the nutrition of interpersonal communication. That's ultimately what Ericksonian hypnosis is all about. Here are just some of my observations about Erickson's personal style, and these are things that you can adapt in your style and your work with clients. First, Milton Erickson questioned his clients rather than just talking to them. I meet a lot of new hypnotists after they learn a basic process of induction and deepening and direct suggestion and awakening. They wonder, is it okay to talk to a client in hypnosis? I talk to my clients in hypnosis all the time. I ask them questions all the time. Milton Erickson did as well. Erickson waited for a response. I know a lot of hypnotists, when they ask a question and they don't get a response right away, are worried that maybe the client was too deep and didn't hear it. And in watching Milton Erickson, you learn how to really be patient. because often that client is assessing their own interpersonal resources before they provide a response. And that silence in the hypnosis session often becomes some of the most valuable parts of a hypnosis session. Erickson, when I watch his videos, leaned in to communicate cooperation. And Jay Lazarus actually wrote an acronym, SOLER, S-O-L-E-R. Sit down with your client. Have an open body posture. Lean forward. Make eye contact with them. Relax. So when you wonder what therapeutic posture should I have, Lazarus articulated it: SOLER, sit down, open body posture, lean forward, make eye contact, relax. But if you have had the opportunity to watch any of Milton Erickson's videos, you see that he perfected that to an art. Erickson, in his personal style, was slow. He was unrushed. He attended his client in every way. And this is really important. He didn't sell 30-minute increments of time or 50-minute therapy sessions. He worked with a client for whatever amount of time was necessary for that client to get well. Erickson matched and mirrored in order to gain rapport. An NLP technique, as we've learned in various NLP classes, the idea of matching and mirroring is essentially doing what our client is doing physically with their hands, with their body movement, because it communicates to our client that we're actually attending to them. And it becomes almost a dance of who is leading who. And we'll get into some of these things in greater detail in successive lessons. And then Erickson's personal style was that of really informal induction. I had a client in my office not too long ago when we finished, and he said, "Aren't we going to do the hypnosis?" And I looked at him, and we'd been there for 60 minutes, and said, "We've been doing hypnosis since the session began." Informal is the nature of Ericksonian hypnosis. And when this course is over, you will know how to do conversational hypnosis, because you will know how to speak Ericksonian by practicing the various ideas in this course. Now I'm going to try in each one of our sessions to actually have an audio demonstration, where you'll have a chance to actually kick back in the chair wherever you are as you listen to this, unless, of course, you're listening in the car. And if you're listening in the car, you can end this MP3 right now, and you can come back to it later on. But if you're in a safe place, I'm going to usually end each session with just a brief demonstration. And because this was the first session, it was really the orientation session, and so I haven't taught you a lot of specific techniques. I actually have, but I haven't necessarily articulated what each one of those are. But I want to give you a chance to actually kick back where you are as you listen to this MP3 and hopefully experience some ideas related to what an informal approach to hypnosis might be. So wherever you are right now, as long as it's a safe place, allow yourself to be comfortable. You purchased this 16 lesson set because you'd like to become an expert hypnotist in Ericksonian techniques. And that's awesome. And so you don't have to slow down, or you don't have to speed up your breath. You can just continue to breathe in and out, in and out. And as you breathe in and out, just be exactly where you are right now. There isn't a goal to this short session that I've established. Rather, there's a goal that you've established. And so if it would help you, go ahead and close the eyes now. Although if you'd like, you can also leave the eyes open. Your success is, of course, not dependent on whether or not you close the eyes or whether or not I ask you to open or close the eyes, but rather on your intention in participating in this course. And so as you breathe in and breathe out, recognize there's a vast reservoir of previous experiences and a place in your mind for new learnings and new experiences, which you can utilize in at least two ways. One, to help other people, and two, to help yourself as well. And although in this first lesson I haven't had a chance to explain every and all aspect of Ericksonian hypnosis, which is why it's a 16-week course, even in the last couple of minutes, by listening to my voice and your own voice of desire, you can probably recognize that some things have already changed. And that is, of course, your own awesome opportunity for transformation. And so go ahead and take in a breath, and as you take in a breath, let that breath energize you, and open the eyes if the eyes were closed, feeling refreshed and fantastic, even after just a short demonstration of an informal approach based on some of the principles of Milton Erickson. Now, based on what I've talked about in this first session, there are 3 homework assignments for you, 3 things that I would like you to practice before you move on to lesson number 2. The first is practice discovering the uniqueness of someone in your world. It could be a family member, a friend, someone new, or even a client who you're working with intention. Discover through conversation what is unique about that person. What you're going to be practicing here is how to draw on the internal resources of our clients in order to help them make change according to their own frame rather than a frame that we project onto them. Don't just notice something that they do or don't do that others do or don't do, but really on a deeper level, try to engage in a conversation with somebody and determine what sets them apart from other people, what makes them very unique. This is, by the way, also an exercise in rapport building. Exercise number 2, pay attention to your own problems. What is it you struggle with or don't like about yourself? Rather than trying to figure out why you are like that or why you struggle, focus on identifying 3 behaviors that could change that problem even if you don't understand why. Again, what this is going to do is help us to practice looking at a solution-oriented approach rather than a problem-oriented approach. A problem-oriented approach is what regression is all about, or Freudian psychoanalysis is all about. Milton Erickson's idea is that we could change, even if we don't understand why something is or was the way that it was. And the third assignment for this week is to look for opportunities. Notice in your conversations with people when you can direct them to their experiences through conversational techniques. That utilization principle, I love that line. I notice you're brailing the fabric on the inseam of your pants. In talking to people, see if you can direct them to their experiences. And this will really help you to begin to practice Ericksonian hypnosis. By the way, one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do over the next 16 lessons is to begin using the Ericksonian language patterns that I'm going to be sharing with you really in everyday life, in everyday situations, not only with others, but with yourself as well. Again, I'm Dr. Richard Nongard. I'm very happy that you've participated in this first session. There are 15 more lessons to follow. Each lesson is typically between 25 and 45 minutes, depending on what I'm trying to cover in each one of these sessions. There are notes for each one of these sessions, typically between 2 to 5 pages, again, depending on the lesson. And my hope is that by the end of this process, you will become an expert in Ericksonian hypnosis, having learned how to speak Ericksonian. Again, check out my website at www.subliminalscience.com And if you are not participating in our forum, we have an online forum, and it's at www.icbchgroup.com. So please visit www.icbchgroup.com. If you have any questions about any of the material that I'm covering in this course, feel free to post a question there. I check that board regularly, and I always answer questions. Thank you. Q. 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 Q.